Which country is the only country to have participated in the modern Olympic Games? Is the question that I will answer by the end of this show. Hello, and welcome to the 5th episode of the More You Know Mondays. The more you know, the more you grow. And this week on the show, I am going to be talking about Jamaica, but not in the modern sense. Everyone knows about Jamaica, but I'm just going to be talking about the history of Jamaica before it became Jamaica. But before I get into that, I just thought, as we do, we start off the show with something positive, something nice, and we're going to start off with Monday's motivations, and rather Monday's affirmations even. And this week's affirmation is obviously like every other week in the form of a quote. And this week's quote goes like this: "Don't talk, just act. Don't say, just show. Don't promise, just prove." And I absolutely love this quote because it's so motivational. It first of all, it's just a thing where a lot of people in this world, I find, they talk a lot about things. Oh, I'm going to do this. Oh, I'm going to do that. But it's just talk at the end of the day. They don't actually do anything. They just talk about what they want to do. But when it comes down to it, they're not willing maybe to put the effort or the actual work into doing it. And with me saying this, I'm not saying that it's bad to talk about things or it's bad to think about things. No. Continually always think and talk and come up with ideas. But what you really need to be doing with those ideas is start moving with them. Start doing something. Start making plans. Like, you can't just... There's nothing where an idea is just an idea if you don't do anything with it. If you start making this idea into an actual thing, then it's no longer just an idea. It's something that you've made. It's a creation of yours. It's something that you can show, something you can not prove, but something you can show to other people. Then it's no longer something that you're just saying you're doing. Oh, hey, look at this. I didn't just say that. I'm not just saying that I'm doing this. I'm actually doing this. So check out what I'm doing now. So then it brings more attention to, whoa, that guy or that girl isn't just talking about what they're doing. They're actually doing that. So it kind of inspires other people to know that if they say that they're going to do something, they just do it. And then other people are just like, whoa, more power to them, and also more power to me, because that just means that I don't have to just say these things. I don't just have to think about these things. I can actually do them and make them into actual real things and make things poppin', Another thing, an important point at the end of it, that it says, don't promise, just prove. And I think that's a real important point. Like, my mum always said to me, don't make promises that you can't keep. And in the same respect, I don't make promises unless I know that I'm going to deliver in that promise. Like, there's nothing worse than breaking a promise, because by making the promise, you're getting someone's hopes up. Oh, they're actually going to do it? All right, cool. They're promising to me. Well, they have to do it now. And then when you don't do it, then it's just like, oh, well, how can I actually trust that the things that you say are real? Because you promised to me that was going to happen, or you promised to me that you were going to do something, and then you didn't show up for me. How can you break trust with anyone that you kind of break a promise to? It, in a sense, if you really think about it, by breaking a promise, you're basically lying to someone. You're basically looking at them in the eyes and like lying to them blankly straight in their face. Or blindly in their face even. And that's not honest. When you make a promise, that's an honest affirmation that you're making to a person or you're making to someone. You can't just go out there and just break it willy-nilly, because then your word... that's it. Your word is your bond, is something that my mum has always told me. Your word is your bond, so if you say that you're going to do something, you better do it. Otherwise, you're breaking your bond. You're breaking your truth. You're breaking that connection that you've made with your words. And now, your words aren't just words. Like, this is the thing. People just say things a lot of the time, but they don't actually mean what they say. Like, I was thinking the other day, like, words like love, people say, they use it so willy-nilly. Oh, I love this. Oh, I love that. And then it kind of, over time, with people using the word love so willy-nilly, so frequently, when it kind of makes the word of love, it loses its actual meaning because it's used so frequently for things that it shouldn't be used for. So, not to say that you can't say, oh, I love eating ice cream, but when you then are saying you love this, you love that, you love this, you love that, and then you then want to say you love someone, like, it's the same word, but by saying you love someone, it brings a bigger gravity than just loving ice cream. So you can say, yeah, you really like ice cream, but you don't love it because I don't know. Maybe, hopefully you understand what I'm saying and the train of thought that I'm on, but words have meanings and words have gravities depending on how you say it, or what you say, or the tone of voice that you have. So your word being your bond means that you have to be able to, people need to be able to trust the things that you say. Otherwise, if I can't trust the things that you say, then that's not just, it's kind of a bigger global thing of not just trusting one person. You not trusting one person could globally go for you not trusting any person, because what one person says, what if they say that's a lie, then how do I trust another person? It's the same thing with fake news and multiple outlets of news platforms. Like, what do I trust? What do I believe? Who can I trust? Who can I believe? Why should I trust you? Why should I believe you? So that's why your word needs to be your bond. Otherwise, no one can trust the things that come out your mouth. So I guess my motivations or affirmations this week are, don't just talk about things, actually do them, put them into motion, and make things start popping, you know? Because I think I've said it before, the phone will not ring if you're not out there making or doing things to make the phone ring, you know? But anyway, I don't want to sound like a broken record. Let's get into the knowledge. So I was looking this up randomly. Not randomly. I am of Jamaican heritage, so it's not so random. I was just looking up about my heritage more than anything. But I would say randomly because I just took a quick look on Google. I was like interested to kind of know about where Jamaica got their name from. So I did a little search and I was doing a little looking in, and I just found so much information about, you know, the travels and explorations of just that side of the world, like the Americas, the Caribbean, Central America and South America. So I got into bits of like Christopher Columbus, I was looking into, and the most interesting part that I came up with, or not came up with, it was through my research, was just the start of the history. So to begin with, let's start talking about pre-Columbus Jamaica. So before Christopher Columbus, who is, if you don't know, you should know, because I think in England, or we learn about this in school, Christopher Columbus. I don't know, it's hard to think back. It's like many, many years ago anyway. But Christopher Columbus, for anyone that doesn't know, is an Italian explorer and navigator who completed 4 voyages across the Atlantic Ocean. And with his 4 explorations, he was actually the one to open way for the European exploration and colonization of the Caribbean, Central America, and South America. And his expedition was sponsored by the Catholic monarchs of Spain, and their exploration was the first European contact with the Caribbean, South America, and Central America, which is pretty cool. And I say cool as in it's the first contact that Europeans made with the Caribbean and Europe. That's how they discovered it. I say discovered with air quotations because these settlements were already there before Christopher Columbus and his people came gallivanting around the seas and stopped their ships on those islands. It's not that they discovered them; they were there before, but he, I guess, discovered them for the first time, in a sense. So we have, before Christopher Columbus, we have around, I don't know where to call it. So they say it starts around, probably for Jamaica, probably around 650 AD. Jamaica was colonized by people of the Austrianoid culture. These were people who were likely probably came from somewhere in South America, and they were amongst the earliest people to probably settle on the island of Jamaica. And then later, they're probably around, I don't know, I'm going to skip forward a bit to 1200 AD, which is where I want to go deeper into this on another episode. It's about the Tanayo culture that developed in Jamaica, which is basically the Aboriginal people of the Caribbean, from what I'm understanding from my research. So these people were obviously brought up in the same kind of culture as the Austrianoid culture, and they were brought from South America. They have a lot of I'm going to go into it deeper, but the most interesting thing for this episode, I think, is that, or to just start off, the Tano, I don't know, I'm butchering this, it's spelled Taino, Tano. And they spoke a language called the Arawakan language. And the most interesting thing about this is that this language is a language that was never written down. It was only spoken. And the other interesting part about it is that a lot of our languages that we speak, like English, Spanish, French, they're all comprised of words from, I guess, colonization, from when they've come across new civilizations and they've kind of taken words and added their interpretations into their language. And English is no different. So from the Arawakan language, the words that they used to say that have been taken and formed into, I guess, English words that we know of now are words such as barako, which is now, or barbecue, which is now barbecue. And they had a word called hamaka, which is now a word that we say as hammock. They also had a word canoe, which is now a word that we say as canoe. But their spelling of it is with a K, which is kind of weird for me because for a language that was never written down and only spoken, how would people know how it was written? Anyway, so they also had a word for tobacco, which we also have as tobacco. And yeah, they have other words that we've taken that have been incorporated into the Spanish language and the English language. But I just think it's pretty interesting. Languages are pretty interesting in anyway. But just to know that a language that was never written down, that was only heard audibly by the people around, they've taken those words and then maybe because it was never written down, maybe there was never any meaning, but other than the original people that spoke that language, they would know what it originally meant to see if there was any connection, to see if we've changed these words or adopted these words and changed them into things like a more palatable, but maybe do they mean the same things as what they meant before? I don't know, it's for another episode, but I just thought it was an interesting point. So then we move on to Christopher Columbus and his exploration of the Americas. So he set sail on his second voyage to the Americas, but I guess, yeah, it was probably on his second voyage to the Americas where he set sail on September the 24th, 1493. 1493. That is probably about 600 years ago from now. Like, I mean, wow. So 600 years ago from now, Christopher Columbus set sail on his second voyage to the another crazy thought is, back in those days, for them to set sail, that means they were traveling by boat. So, because I just think it's crazy. Like, they used to travel by boat, and not like cruise ships, like setting the sail like pirates type boats. And he set sail on September the 24th, 1493, and he landed in an island that he named Dominica on November the 3rd, 1493. So it took him 2 months to travel from, I guess, Spain to Dominica, and he named the country because he discovered it, I guess, and that is now, I guess, that is the modern day country, the Commonwealth of Dominica. On November the 22nd, he landed on a country called Hispaniola. And it's funny because he actually spent his time on Hispaniola just searching the interior for gold. He also happened to bring sugarcane to Hispaniola when he landed there on his second voyage. Another interesting fact is that the first sugar mill in the Caribbean was established in Hispaniola in 1516. But I'll go into that in another episode more deeply, because today we're just talking about Jamaica. So after he left Hispaniola on the 24th of April, so he spent probably December, January, February, March, April. So about 5 months he spent in Hispaniola before setting sail again to land and arrive on an island which is now known as Cuba on the 30th of April. And then he landed in Jamaica on May the 5th. But he wasn't in Jamaica for very long, so he went back to Hispaniola in August on the 20th. After staying there for some time, he was actually spending a lot of his time on the western side of the island, which is kind of now known as modern-day Haiti, before traveling back to Spain to obviously show the king what he had found and what he had discovered, I say again with air quotations. So it probably wasn't until Columbus's fourth voyage to the Americas when he happened to stumble upon Jamaica again. It wasn't so much he landed there on purpose, he actually landed there by accident. There was a storm that broke out in the sea, and after he was sailing for nearly a year, the ship happened to land on the coast of St. Anne's Bay in Jamaica on June the 25th, 1503. So Columbus, this is the funniest part of the story that I found for Christopher Columbus. So Christopher Columbus was then stranded on Jamaica for almost a year because a Spaniard by the name of Diego Mendez, So I was actually going to edit that out. Sorry about that. But I've decided to keep it in because, you know, sometimes you stumble and you can't get the words out. And that was a case where I couldn't. So let me start again. So a Spaniard by the name of Diego Mendez and some natives paddled a canoe to get help from Hispaniola. But unfortunately, the island's governor, Nicolas de Ovando y Cacaros, probably butchered that name, but he really didn't like Christopher Columbus. So he obstructed all the efforts any efforts that came to him in Hispania to help Christopher Columbus. He was just like, nah, man. Let's just let him just swear out in Jamaica. So he did. He obstructed all the efforts that there were to rescue him and his men. And in the meantime, Christopher Columbus was he was mesmerized by the natives. And they were also mesmerized by him as well. They looked at him as if he was some sort of god because he correctly predicted a lunar eclipse that happened on February the 29th, 1504. So they were just like, whoa, who is this man that got shipwrecked on our island and predicted something that happened in the sky that we had no idea about? So, yeah, they were mesmerized by him. But lucky for Columbus, on June the 29th, 1504, help finally arrived for him. And the governor decided to give in, and so I was like, I guess we can help Columbus. Is he still stuck on Jamaica? He's still alive. Send him a ship, man. So they sent him a ship, and the rest is history. He was back. And about 5 years later, in 1509, the Spanish Empire began its first official governance of Jamaica. That was the year also that Columbus's son, Diego Columbus, instructed Juan de Escobar to formally occupy Jamaica in his name, Esquivel had accompanied Christopher Columbus on his second trip exploring the Americas in 1493, where he participated in the invasion of Hispaniola. So anyway, the first Spanish settlement was founded in 1509 near St. Anne's Bay and was named Sevilla la Nueva, or New Seville. To be honest, I think this is partly where my interest for the research or the history of Jamaica came from, because there's a town in Jamaica called Spanish Town, and I was always interested in, like, why was it called Spanish Town? What was the connection of the Spanish to Jamaica? So doing this research has really kind of bridged that connection for me. So it's really been interesting for me. I hope it's interesting for you as well. And I just wanted to give you that little segue. Also, it's important to note that at this point in history, it actually wasn't called Jamaica yet. When the Spanish, colonized the island, they called it Santiago. So it was named the Colony of Santiago when the Spanish invaded the island that we now know as Jamaica. So the first Spanish settlement was in 1509, and after probably about 30 years, the settlers moved from St. Anne's Bay to a newer, healthier part of the island, which they named Villa de la Vega, and it was later named Saint Jorge de la Vega. And the reason why we know it as Spanish Town is because when the English conquered the island in 1655, the English renamed Saint Jorge de la Vega, and they called it Spanish Town. And Saint Jorge de la Vega was the capital city of Santiago, or what we now know as Jamaica. And it's funny that, it was served as the capital city for both the Spanish and the English. But when Jamaica got their independence, they moved the capital to Kingston. Anyway, other settlements that were established by the Spanish include Esquivel, which is now known as Old Harbour Bay, Jamaica. Oristan, which is now known as Bluefields, Jamaica. Savannah la Mar, Savannah la Mar Manterias, which is now known as Montego Bay. And Las Choraras, which is now known as Ocho Rios. I'm probably butchering all this Spanish, but hey, I'm trying. So that was just to name a few anyway. So in 1611, the population of Spanish Jamaica was about 1,500 people, which included about 700 Spanish people, or Spaniards, about 100 free black people, 74 Tanean people, and about 600 black slaves, and 75 foreigners. Although it's probably common practice to mention that the Taneos Taíno people, they weren't really included in the consensus, because when the Spanish invaded invaded and conquered, any surviving Aboriginal people of Jamaica, the Taínos, they went to the hills, they went to the mountains. So, and they mixed with a lot of the the freed African slaves in the hills. That's where they went to mix a lot with, or that's who they mingled with a lot. So those Taínos that mixed with the freed African slaves became the ancestors to the Jamaican Maroons of Nanny Town. And if you're familiar with any somewhat of Jamaican history, you will be up to date with the Jamaican national hero, which is Nanny of Maroons, which is again another episode that I will go into on another episode. Another topic another inspirational, interesting, historic figure I will go into on another episode. So the Spanish enslaved many of the native people on the island of Jamaica, and overworked them, harming them to, obviously with the slave trade and slavery. But the biggest upset for the Spanish was the fact of they were very disappointed by the lack of gold that they found on Jamaica. Because of that fact, they mainly used Jamaica as a military base, which is interesting when it comes to talking about the British or the English conquering of Jamaica. So it was probably in late 1654 when the English leader Oliver Cromwell, which anyone that's aware of from British history or English history would know that Oliver Cromwell was a statesman and who led Parliament of England's armories against King Charles during the English Civil War, and ruled the British Isles as the Lord Protector from 1655 until his death in 1658. And if I'm not mistaken, there was such thing as Cromwell's Law, which essentially was enforced by the use of soldiers. So Oliver Cromwell believed that women and girls should dress in a proper manner. Makeup was banned, and Puritan leaders and soldiers would roam the streets or towns and scrub off any makeup found on unsuspecting women. He was not a good person in English history, but he was the leader of the time, and he was the leader of the time who was in power of England when they conquered Jamaica. Now, it's also important to say that the reason why this all actually happened was because Oliver Cromwell didn't really like the Spanish. So he launched an all-on armada attack on the Spanish colonies of the Caribbean in hopes of claiming them for himself. And basically it's just one of those ones of you owned that, yeah, Spain? I don't like you. Now I own it. What are you going to do about it, kind of thing. So with this mentality, they went on with their armada and they tried to attack the Spanish fort at Santiago Domingo in Hispaniola. However, the Spanish were quite beefed up at this port. They had a very huge army, and they were ready for the English attack. And for them, the Spanish, they were like, is that all you got? And the English were sent off running. So after this failed attempt, they tried again, but this time they tried to go for see how the defenses were on Spanish Jamaica. So they went to the Spanish colony, and in May 1655, around 7,000 English soldiers landed near Jamaica's Spanish town capital. The English invasion was very overwhelming for the small number of Spanish troops that they had at the time, because English were coming with 7,000 soldiers in one attack, whereas the population of Jamaica at that time was only probably about 2,500 people, and probably about 700 of those people, probably less, about 300 of those people probably were military. So yeah, they were completely overwhelmed, and the English managed to completely capture Jamaica from the Spanish. And in the following years, the Spanish repeatedly tried to reclaim Jamaica back from the English, and they failed every single time because the English were just too powerful at this point. And obviously, if they're bringing 7,000 people to the island as soldiers, they're probably going to beef up the defense that they add to the island, knowing that you had so little people there, so little soldiers there, and they're not going to try and lose this to you so easily after they won it from you so easily. So in the early days of the colonization of Jamaica, when the English first took the colony from Spain, Oliver Cromwell got there in the end. Oliver Cromwell increased the island's population of white people by sending indigenous servants and prisoners captured in battle with the Irish and the Scottish, as well as some common criminals, to Jamaica. And this practice continued into the rule under Charles II. But unfortunately, a lot of white people died due to the tropical diseases. So that kept the population of white people in Jamaica low, under 10,000 people, around about the times of like 1740. But then the population of white people increased through the migration from Britain to 80,000 by the 1780s. So in 40 years, they increased the population from 10,000 to 80,000. And these people, I assume the people who migrated from Britain, they weren't so susceptible to tropical diseases. But it's also important to know that the slave population in the 1670s to the 1680s never exceeded over around 10,000 African slaves. But by the end of the 17th century, imports of slaves had increased the population of black people on the island by 3 times the number of white people, which is obviously, it's something that I can believe, because they would obviously have the white people that lived on the island of Jamaica would be the upper class people, and the black people, the black slaves that they brought from Africa to Jamaica, would be the people working. So it doesn't surprise me that there was more black people than white people on the island, because they needed more people to work. So that means that they didn't have to lift any fingers. So at the beginning of the Stuart era of the monarchs, this was when when there was a civil governor to be appointed to Jamaica, which was in 1661. And this political pattern, which was established in Jamaica, has lasted well into the 20th century. So the second governor, Lord Windsor, brought with him in 1662 a proclamation from the king giving Jamaica's non-slave population the rights of English citizens, including the rights to make their own laws, which is, if you think about it, a game changer. Because if the people who live there, who are freed slaves, are able to make their own laws, then they should be able to govern their own people without any outside iron fist, I guess. So although Lord Windsor only actually spent 10 days in Jamaica, that was all the time he needed to set up lay the foundations of the governing system that was to last for 2 centuries, which is crazy. So that system is basically a crown-appointed governor who is acting with the advice of a nominated council in the legislature, which is basically just the authority that makes the laws. This authority consists of the governor and an elected but highly unrepresentative House of Assembly. So it's pretty cool to know that Lord Windsor, who was the second governor of Jamaica, so this was in 1662, which is almost 400 years ago. He was the one that set up the foundations to how Jamaica is governed now. I don't know too much about the governance of Jamaica because I don't live there, but if it's anything like the governance of most countries, like even this country, baffles me to my core how this country is run, and what those people who live in number 10, what they actually do. Mr. Johnson, what is your job description? Because I don't understand how, this is going completely off tangent, but how a government can tell the people to do one thing and then not do it themselves if it's so important for our country. But anyway, as I was saying, I'm actually going to leave this episode on Jamaica here and do a second part, because I've just talked about the Spanish and the English conquering, and there's just so much more in the history of Jamaica before we get up to present day, and I want to give it its correct justice. So I'll give you another sample of Jamaica's history on another episode. But the question that I asked at the top of the show, which I am now going to answer, which country is the only country to have participated in all of the modern Olympic Games? And it kind of sounds like a weird question. Not weird. Yeah, it's a weird question. And in the sense of, you would think, what do you mean? Like, what countries? Wouldn't all countries have participated in the modern day Olympics? Like, that's just common practice? That's just common sense. But it's actually more bizarre than you think. So basically, there's about 5 countries that have been represented at all the Summer Olympics, the modern Summer Olympics. I say modern because before the modern Summer Olympics, that started in 1896, it was the ancient Olympics. So the only 5 countries that have been represented at all the Summer Olympics are Greece, Great Britain, France, Switzerland, and Australia. Although not all of them have been part of, like, have always been called that country when representing, or always been named, like, be known as that country, be known as that name for the country when participating in the Olympics. So when Switzerland, So Switzerland is on the list because they boycotted the 1956 Olympics, which was held in Australia, in Melbourne in Australia. And the reason why they boycotted this Olympics was because of Soviet Union invasion of Hungary, and the Swiss team competed in Stockholm instead, which was several months earlier. So France did not send a team to the 1904 Olympic Games. However, there was a lone Frenchman that did compete for USA and a mixed team. Also, in 1896, Great Britain competed as part of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, while Australia participated in 1908 and in 1912 as part of a combined Australian team with New Zealand. Therefore, out of the 5 nations that have participated in the modern Olympic Games, Greece is the only country that has participated under its own flag for all of them. So there you go. There you have it. And with that, I will call it the end of the show. So I hope you've understood. I hope you've enjoyed the 5th episode of the podcast. I hope you've enjoyed the intro to the history of Jamaica, some of the interesting facts that I've found and thought about and researched and thought I would share with you guys. So hopefully you've liked that, and if you have liked it, please stay tuned for next week's episode. I have not been very good with the words again this episode. I do apologize. Because I'm not doing it in any order, I might not do the second part of Jamaica next week. I'll probably do something else and then come back to the second part of Jamaica at a later stage. So it flip-flops around history, so you get to learn different things every week, as opposed to it being solely connected to, even though I feel like each episode somewhat to a level has been connected, but that's not on purpose. Just randomly been selecting topics from my list of topics that I wanted to talk about. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any topics or anything that you want me to look into deeper and you want to hear an episode about, please drop us a DM on the social medias at My Opinion Means on all of them, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And if you want a little shout out, or even if you want to send us something you want to say or whatever, just drop us an email at myopinionmeans@gmail.com. And yeah, like, follow, subscribe, and all that jazz. Hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you for listening, and peace.